Oh, that reminds me. So this is obviously session 1. If anything ever happens in the video and you're like, hey, can you edit that out? You just have to tell me. I will mark the time and it's gone. Okay. These videos will not be shared with anybody else, Dee. They will only be shared with you and possibly Caroline when she's here, right? So just so you're clear, these are 100% private between you and me. Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Course overview.
Cool. Okay. So I'm going to send you a PDF copy of these slides.
Okay.
So everything I talk about, you're going to get a PDF copy, probably before we get off the phone, honestly. Okay, so this whole course that we're about to cover is called Cloud Practitioner Essentials. You may remember from yesterday, let me bring this up. You may remember from yesterday that this is one of the core fundamental, hello. Oh, yeah. This is one of the core fundamental exam, like classes that's associated with the Cloud Practitioner exam, which is the hexagon at the bottom, right? So this is the official course that goes with it. The course alone does not prepare you to pass the exam. It's like 60 to 80% of it, but it gets you really close. And so we're actually going to go through the official course material for the class that's associated with this exam, but there's a little bit more to do to get ready to pass the exam. And then once you do that, it kind of builds momentum. So what's going to happen is that we're going to talk about Amazon Web Services so that you can get an idea of what it is. And then we're going to talk about cloud computing in general, just like in an industry standpoint, so that you can get context. Because it's like, well, why is this relevant? What is this certification? Why is this important? Like, who cares? Why do people pay $54 billion a year to Amazon to do this stuff, right? Like, what does it matter? And then from there, what will happen is we're going to start getting into Amazon's like physical like infrastructure, like where are their buildings located? When we like start these virtual computers, where do they live? Like, is there a place that you can like, could you walk into a building and find them? And if so, what part of the country or the world would that be at, right? Because Amazon doesn't like you to know exactly where their computer is. Like if you were at my house, I'd be like, hey, this computer is right here, like this right here. And so this screen and all the data and the documents is on a hard drive right on this computer. And so Amazon doesn't like to tell you exactly where the stuff is because people try frequently to blow their buildings up. I know that sounds funny, but they do. And just because, that way they can take out, Netflix as a great evil or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to talk about the physical infrastructure, and then we're going to talk about how the infrastructure is connected together, which is what the module 4 networking is on the screen. And then we're going to talk about like different things, like how things get stored, and then security. And then things like, how do we watch things to see if they fail? How much do things cost? Because just so you know, everything in cloud either has a security implication, like there's like a security like cost, or there's an actual cost. Like, as you can imagine, if I was here and I own the server and I turn it on, the only thing I pay for is electricity. Right. Because I own the server, right? It's sitting right here. Like, it's like a laptop. What do I care? Right. But when you use somebody else's server in somebody else's data center, when you turn it on, you not only pay for the electricity, but you pay for the privilege of using the computer because they're hosting it, right? My laptop is right here. So pricing is a big deal in Amazon because if you don't know how to manage pricing, you can like put companies out of business, right? Because all of a sudden you spent $100,000 a month instead of $5 million, right? And then we're gonna talk a little bit about migration and innovation because a lot of people like for example, if my computer is right here next to me, how would I then migrate that up to AWS if I wanted to do that? Like, what would that like take to do that? And then the last is just covering the exam. Like, that's the last module. So these are like the 10 modules that we're gonna go through. Okay. This class is typically 6.5 hours long. You and I are gonna take about 10 to 12 hours to go through it. And the reason is because it's dumb that the class is 6.5 hours long. It's too fast. It's too much information. It's too fast. And so even the company that I like work for, we now run it over 2 days. So we give them 13 hours to take the class. So just so you know, we're going to do that. And then what will happen is that every time we cover a module, our next session will probably include a hands-on lab. So you can actually do some lab work.
That's perfect.
Like, you get to touch it. Like, what is this? AWS stuff, right? So We might not get to that until after module 3, but pretty much at that point, it'll be lecture lab. And so you and I will walk through stuff together. Okay. Good. So I'm going to talk about stuff. If at any point in time you are like, Michael, you just said something and I have no idea what you just said, stop me. Just say, hey, Rishi, what is ACM, right? Or Rishi, what's an availability zone? Like, just stop me. Because if you don't know it by the time I say it and I'm not explaining what the word is, then I'm probably assuming that you know what it is from a prior statement. But this stuff takes like, 7 to 10 times to stick. So.
Okay.
All right. Hey, name, what do you work? No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to do all this stuff, right? I think we're pretty clear on who you are and why you're here. So
yeah.
Is there anything else I should know though?
Trying to have a baby. That's about it. That's all I've got.
Good. Well, I can't think of a better set of parents, so that'll be perfect.
Thank you.
All right. So then that was just that first piece. So let's go over to the second piece, which is Introduction to Amazon Web Services. Okay. All right. So the main 3 things that we're doing here, and by the way, I do recommend notes, even though you're going to get this in PDF format, because the note-taking process will actually drive it deeper into your brain, right? All right. So we're really focused on here is that there's 3 kind of models of cloud computing that people use, and it's really just like, in a sense, like hosting, it's application hosting. And there's, according to Amazon, and I'm going to be clear about this, according to Amazon, there are 6 benefits of cloud computing. And I say that because if you go out and research this in Google, if you're like, hey, Google, what are the 6 benefits of cloud computing? They actually might be different than the ones that Amazon's going to describe here. But as you can imagine, that they want people to take this course so that they not only get the skills, but that they're comfortable with AWS, so they'll spend money with AWS because they're running a business, right?
Right.
So they want you to do the stuff. They usually, by the way, will frame up scenarios in the framework of like, we're a coffee shop. Like, we're a coffee shop, so how does that work? Because most people can relate to the act of like ordering coffee, right? And I hope that's not something delicious because I'm jealous already. So what will happen is that they'll frame it up as a coffee shop. So for example, all modern computing centers around what they call a client server model. So this picture right here is actually what is traditionally called a client server model, which means that has a client, right? Customer comes in, let's say it's you, right? And you come in and you're like, hey, can I get a double decaffeinated half calf with a twist of lemon, which I just made that up. I have no idea what that actually is, but let's say it's a latte or a cup of coffee or decaf or whatever. Right. So you make a request where you say, hey, can I get a cup of coffee, right? And so then what happens is that you are talking to the like cashier, but let's say it's actually the barista, like you're talking to him directly and you're saying, hey, can I get a latte? And the person's like, sure. And let's say you come in and you're like, hey, you know what? I actually want an oat milk latte because I'm lactose intolerant and I want you to add a sugar to it. And so you just give them the order at one fell swoop. And what happens is the barista makes the order and then they return the response, right? Because you've asked for something and they give you a response. So that's the client server model, which in the sense of the customer is the client, the barista is the server, and the server is always sitting there as long as the coffee shop is open, ready to take requests from the client. So that's a client server model. So this is like it in like computing speak, where it's like you've got like your computer or like my computer, which is sitting somewhere else, and it's talking to AWS's servers on the back end, making requests, right? So it's no different than this. The difference is that you and I as customers are located all over the world, just connected through the internet. And the server that we're talking to is actually an Amazon AWS server. Meaning there's actually a series of servers out there whose sole job it is to listen for us making requests of it, right? So no different than a barista sitting there waiting for someone to give them their coffee order. Amazon has like thousands of servers that are just sitting there all over the world. And if you can log in properly, because we like to log into things to make sure that security is good, and you make a request, those servers will answer that request and return output back to the client. In this case, let's say it's my laptop or your laptop. So the customer is the client and the barista is the server in this case. Now, what can we request? Because over here, we were ordering coffee, right? So then what are we asking for here? Well, those little icons on the left-hand side, by the way, these little like blue icons, they're supposed to represent various things like email, databases, which is a way of storing information, networking, which is a way of connecting computers together. So just to say this is that the pictures are not awesome, but on the left-hand side, what that is it's just a variety of services that you can ask for. What kind of services? Well, just so you're not overwhelmed, I'm not going to show you that, but there's 200 services inside of AWS, and we're gonna talk about them one at a time. I'm not going to show you the whole list. Okay. Yeah, just so you know, I want to give this to you in bits, so not overwhelm you with the 200 services that AWS has. Does that client server model though make sense as far as like barista, coffee, customer, that kind of thing? Okay. So oddly enough, when you go to a web page and you type in let's say www.catvideos.com, which I would be weirded out if that was actually a thing. Anyway, if you go to catvideos.com, what happens is that your browser has a client is going to a server. The server is getting the request for catvideos.com and then it's returning output back to the browser. So the browser is the client. The web server that you're talking to is the server. And then it's getting the web page back, which is what is the product. It's the thing that's being given. Okay.
Gotcha.
So, and by the way, if I'm ever like dumbing it down too much or going too far up, please let me know. I'm trying to fill you out as far as like.
No, I appreciate you taking it slow. Trust me. I am aware that computers are not my strong point. So.
Not yet. They will be.
It's true. Not yet. Yes.
Yeah, they will be. Okay, so then, all right, so we've established that the client server model is how we talk to things like Amazon Web Services or any of the other cloud providers, because there's actually a bunch of them, not just Amazon. But here's the thing, then what is cloud computing? Like people talk about the cloud. You see commercials on the cloud. You know, the cloud is like this miraculous thing. All the cloud is a bunch of other like company servers. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of other servers out there offering services. It's no different than like there's a bunch of coffee shops out there. And if you walk into any Starbucks, you can pretty much order the same like cup of coffee anywhere you go. And that's all it is that Amazon's got a bunch of like servers all over the world and you can go ask for services off these servers. And it's the same services all over the world. That's all it is. But what kind of services are we talking about? Well, things like if you want a virtual laptop, like a virtual, what they call a virtual machine, like a virtual desktop, virtual laptop, you can actually start one up in the cloud. So you can have a virtual access to what's called a virtual machine, sometimes referred to as VMs as in the short. And so that's one of the services that AWS offers is that you could actually get access to virtual machines. Alexa, are you familiar with Alexa?
Yeah, it's you ask it questions and it does stuff in your house and whatnot.
Yeah, that's actually an AWS service. Yes, Alexa, stop. I know, I was talking about you. So what it's interesting is that Alexa is just another service that AWS offers, Amazon offers, right? Is that it's like Alexa is a service where in exchange for being able to eavesdrop and listen to all your information, they basically give you the ability to search and do all this stuff. Sorry, was that weird?
No, I mean, I had suspected as much, was why we didn't get one, but
yeah, it basically takes little audio recordings of everything that's going on around it. And you can go in and delete the recordings, but it does actually keyword track stuff, right? Anyway, so that's one of the services that they offer. Now, here's the reason why you would do this. Let's say you're running a business, and all of a sudden it's like someone comes to you and says, we're going to run one of the best like websites in the world, and you need 100 computers to handle the load on that website. So I know that may be difficult to imagine, but imagine the website is so busy, it's like Facebook, that you actually need 100 laptops or 100 desktops in order to be able to feed that web page out and not have it crash, right? Now, just to say this, like in our houses, like I don't have space for 100 computers. I couldn't even plug them in, right? Same for most businesses, by the way. Most businesses don't have room for 100 computers because you got to power them, you got to cool them, you got to do all this stuff. And when they create a space for a bunch of computers, like inside a business, They call that a data center.
Okay.
So a data center is just a place where you can actually run a bunch of computers. By the way, traditionally businesses call those computers, they call them servers, right? So that's what a server is, right? A server is basically a virtual computer. I mean, or sorry, not a virtual computer, a computer. And so what ends up happening is that cloud computing is the ability to, instead of you having to run 100 servers in your house or in your data set, like in your data center in your business, Amazon runs data centers where with a credit card, you can go virtually buy 100 servers, run your website on those 100 servers, and you don't have to take up any space in your office or your house at all. Amazon will do all of that for you. And not only that, you can get 100 servers in 5 minutes. So as you can imagine, if I go out and buy 100 servers, not only am I not going to be able to just walk out to Best Buy and buy 100 like systems, but can you imagine unboxing them, setting them up, plugging them in, making sure that they all work the same way? And like you, cloud computing solves all of that. You no longer have to set up your own computers. Somebody else is now doing it for you, and they're doing it faster and better than you can, which is true, actually. Not you, but like us, right? Whoever's doing the setups. So cloud computing is really just them saying, look, if you give us money, we'll give you computers.
Makes sense.
Which is like, yeah, cool, take my money, because I don't want to have to deal with this. I don't want to have to deal with setting all this stuff up. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to access services on demand, like virtual machines, which is what we're talking about when we talk about servers, right? You don't have to buy any hardware, because they're buying the hardware. You're not buying the hardware. So you get to avoid upfront large investments. Can you imagine? So just think about this for a second, because I actually just recently had to buy computers for the boys. You may know this, but I like rescued my nephew from my brother because he was super abusive. And so like I got 2 children. I have 2 children now. But I had to buy them desktops recently. And those desktops cost about $600 a piece, which, I thought was actually a pretty good price for their first computer. Imagine if I bought 100 of them, right? Because I needed to run a website. So that's $60,000. Well, like that could be a sizable chunk of change for me. I'm not necessarily interested in doing that. Right. So businesses run into the same problems. If their budget's $100,000 and they have to spend 60 to get a bunch of computers, they can avoid that upfront large investment by just asking Amazon to run the 100 boxes. I know that sounds weird, because you're like, doesn't it cost the same to run 100 servers in your data center as it does to run 100 servers over in Amazon's data center? And it doesn't. Amazon's not only cheaper, but here's the cool thing. Let's say that you buy 100 servers to run your website. And then you find out that the marketing guy didn't really know what he was talking about, and you actually only need 50. With Amazon, you can just turn off the 50 boxes and you stop paying for them. If I bought 100 boxes and I had to give 50 back to the manufacturer, they wouldn't take it. You can't give the boxes back, right? Especially after they've been used, right? So Amazon allows you to basically buy and give back services, and there's no contract. So this allows you to be super flexible, because like if you come to me and like, hey, we're going to start a foot fetish website, which by the way, I thought was absolutely hilarious.
It's gonna work too.
Just so you know, the first offer, she was like, hey, can we just film us like having sex? And I was like, no. First of all, no, we're not dating, and we're definitely not having sex. And then she was like, how about foot fetish? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Fuck it, let's do foot fetish.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, but imagine like if you had it's a brand new idea and we have no idea whether it's going to work, and instead of having to buy like 100 boxes to see if that's going to work, we can just test it right here on AWS. And if the foot fetish thing doesn't function, then guess what? We just give the servers back to AWS, and it didn't cost us anything. We don't have to hold on to a bunch of hardware that we can't sell or do anything with. So you really only provision compute resources as needed, which is that third kind of point, which is like, great, provision compute resources as needed. And then if you don't need them, give them back to Amazon. So give you an example. Let's say that you need 100 boxes and you decide on a certain size of virtual machines of computer, and they cost $1 an hour, which is not unheard of, by the way. But we buy 100 of them, so it's costing us $100 an hour. And so we run them for, let's say, 100 hours, which would what cost us what, $10,000 or something like that.
Right.
And at the 100th hour, we're like, you know what? We only need 50 of these. We give back the other 50. We delete them.
Mhm.
The next thing you know, instead of paying $100 an hour, we're paying 50, right?
Yeah.
So that's the power of this whole thing, is that you're only going to pay for what you use, which means that if you need 100 servers, then all of a sudden you decide that you are only going to use 50. Guess what? You only pay for 50. So you give back what it is that you don't need. So that's cloud computing. Cloud computing is the ability that basically with a credit card, you can basically create an account. You have to have a credit card and a phone number, but you create an account and you get instant access to on-demand resources that you only pay for if you ask for them. Like you don't pay for them otherwise. But like if you ask for 100 boxes, 100 servers, 100 virtual machines, you pay for 100 virtual machines. If you give back 75 of them, you only pay for 25. If you give back all of them, you stop paying anything. Nothing. You pay nothing at that point in time.
That's perfect. Yeah.
It actually is really nice. And when this came out in 2006, by the way, people were like, "There's no way anyone's gonna use this." Well, yeah. Guess what? They were all wrong. This is now the de facto way that new businesses start. New businesses don't buy hardware anymore. They actually just use cloud computing.
That makes sense.
Okay, so there's 3 different ways that people can deploy servers. So this says a cloud computing model. It's not really a cloud computing deployment model. It's a just computer deployment model. There's only 3 ways to do computers. You're either hosting them on premise. You see that on premise thing in the middle, which means, by the way, on premise means in your house. That's what it means, because it's on premise, right? And that premise is your house or your business.
Oh, okay.
So on premise just means like there's like little trees there, which cracks me up, right? It's like if you're hosting it on premise, that means you're hosting it where you're working or where you're living. So I don't know why this is a cloud computing model, because there's no cloud there. What's happening is that you're hosting it in your office or in your house.
Right.
Now, then there's the other model, which is the cloud model, which is where we go to Amazon and say, "Hey, Amazon, I need 100 boxes. I need 100 virtual machines." That means that nothing's hosted in my office or in my home. They're all in AWS. They're all in Amazon Web Services. That's a pure cloud model, which is the one on the left.
Okay.
And then there's the one on the right, which I don't even know why they have a name for this, but it's called hybridized, which basically means that I'm running servers in my house or in my office, and I'm running servers up in AWS. Why do they call it that? I honestly, to this day, I'm still like, and I like to think I'm around, I talk with a lot of smart people, but they always talk about like, is the server on premise, meaning it's hosted in a data center? Is it with a third party like AWS or Microsoft or somebody like a cloud provider, which is what cloud is? Or are they doing both, where some of the stuff is run inside of a data center in the business and some of it's run in AWS, like it has a cloud provider? And that's what the hybrid model is. So if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, D, I want you to run our 100 server website completely in the cloud," that means that you would run it all in AWS. Right. If someone comes to you and says, "D, I want you to run our 100 server website on premise," that means you and I are going to Best Buy and we're going to have to buy 100 boxes and set them up, right? Which we wouldn't do that. And if we're hybridized, let's say that someone comes to you and says, "You know what? I don't trust AWS because of Alexa, because Alexa's weird. Let's buy 50 servers and we'll put them in our office. And let's take the other 50 servers and let's put them in cloud." And what would happen is you'd have to figure out some technologies to make sure that traffic for the website could go half to on-premise and half to cloud. That's the hybrid model.
Okay.
You follow me thus far?
I am.
Okay. Any questions of any type?
No, I think you explained it pretty well. So if you were like an older business that used to have your stuff on premise for like 25 computers, but maybe you need more now, you just go to AWS and they would give you the other, say you need the other 75 in cloud, and that would be considered hybrid.
I love working with smart people. That's right.
Thank you.
That's 100% accurate. There was nothing that you said there that was inaccurate.
Okay.
That's so cool. I love that. Good job, D. All right. Okay, so this is just going to basically reinforce the thing we've been talking about. A cloud-based deployment is you run everything in the cloud, which means like AWS in this case, right? Amazon Web Services. The on-premise deployment, well, you just described that, right? This is the one we were running in the office, right? So nothing's in the cloud, everything's in our office, or like you said, older businesses, by the way, almost always have an on-premise component. Why? But cloud didn't come out till 2006. So these people had to run servers somehow, so they did it in their own data centers, right? So that's normal.
Right.
So almost like any new business that started after like 2008, 2009 doesn't really do this anymore. But like Honeywell, which I worked for back in 2018, which is a 120-year-old company, they have a bunch of data centers. And then of course there's the hybrid model, which you just described, which is like 25 servers in on-premise and 75 in cloud. Like that's all kind of normal, right? That's where you're basically straddling the two types. You're in a data center and you're in cloud. By the way, this is your first look at the web page that governs all of the services in AWS. I do not want you to memorize this in any way, shape, or form, but let me just show you a better view so that you can get a feel for what we're looking at. There you are. And it's going to give me a two-factor challenge, which is totally normal. I'm going to log in. All right. So this that you're about to see on the screen is the AWS Management Console. This is one of the three ways by which you can interact with those servers that we were talking about before, those servers that are always listening for a request. So there's the web console, there's the command line, which you can just abbreviate as CLI, command line interface. And then there's something called programmatic, which means basically you're going to write software, you're going to write code. So there's the web page you can click on. There's the command line where you can run certain commands. And then there's like coding, where basically you can talk to it through a coding kind of like toolkit, if you will. Obviously, the coding toolkit is the most complex. It's also the most powerful. The command line is the second most powerful, but it's also the second most complex. And then the management console is not as powerful as the other two, but man, it is way easier to use, way easier to use. So for learning purposes, we mainly do stuff in this web-based web page right here, this console. Okay. Now, all of this other stuff around here is not the services. Like everything that's on this page is just them advertising. Oddly enough, if you click on the all services little arrow that's right here, it opens up this whole menu of services that AWS offers. I don't need you to memorize this because no one does, just so we're clear. Okay. But if you need a computer, it's going to be under the compute section. If you need a hard drive, it's going to be under the storage section. If you need, for example, networking, it's going to be under the networking section. So just know that they do try to keep the categories fairly intuitive. Like if you were like, hey, you know what we're going to do? I know I'm going to keep picking on this. You know what we're going to do with our foot fetish site? We're going to create some augmented reality, virtual reality pictures of our feet, which, by the way, that would be a fucking genius idea, actually, for those people who are really into that. Yeah. Like there's a service for that called Amazon Sumerian. And guess what it's under? It's under augmented reality, virtual reality, because they try to name the categories fairly intuitive, right? And by the way, they say that, and they're not always like super intuitive. Like machine learning, that's a whole rabbit hole of stuff, right? But just know this is where the 200 services come from. But we're not only going to focus on certain cores of these, because I will tell you, no person I've ever met on the planet knows all of these services. So they're just there because Amazon's offering them. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So this is the console. And by the way, if you have to have a login to an account, which you'll actually see later, but you can create your own account at any time. It just requires a credit card and a phone number. Just know that just because you create an account doesn't mean you get charged anything. You don't get charged anything. They just do that for identity verification.
Okay.
But if you're ever like, hey, I would like to log in, you can always do AWS console. And it will bring up AWS management console as the first thing. Now, going back to our slide deck, the whole purpose of them snapshotting this and putting it as a screen capture inside the slide was for you to see that there's a large number of services in here.
Mhm.
So I think at the time this slide was made, there was 175 and they have over 200 services now, right? You do not need to know all the services, just the core ones.
Okay.
All right. Now, any questions before we talk about the 6 benefits of cloud computing?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so here's the 6 benefits according to AWS. 1, you basically can, to say this is that you no longer have to spend money on data centers, right? That's really the thing.
Mhm.
The cool thing about the cloud computing approach is that instead of having to invest in a bunch of hardware, which is going to deprecate over time, it's going to fail, it's going to require maintenance and replacement. Instead of you having to buy a bunch of hardware, Amazon basically says, look, don't buy the hardware, we'll buy the hardware, and in exchange, you pay us to use our hardware. We'll basically rent it out to you. Now, your expense is going to be variable because if you decide to use our servers for a day, then we're going to charge you 24 hours. If you decide to use them for a month, then we're going to charge you 732 hours. But what it does is it changes the whole thing of like, man, I got to buy new, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something like, I got to buy a new building every like 6 months or something.
Right.
You don't have to do that. Instead, Amazon takes care of all that stuff, right? Amazon is constantly expanding the number of servers that they rent or share out with people. And they're so good at it that they do it cheaper than most people can run their own data centers. So you basically only pay for what you use, and that keeps expenses variable. And so they can be as cheap or as expensive as you need based on what you need. So that's the distinction. In addition, most people do not run businesses where being good at running computers is the core differentiator. What do I mean by that? Like Home Depot is supposed to be in the business of selling like home improvement goods, right?
Right.
If they spend a bunch of money to get good at running servers, they're kind of wasting their time because they could have spent that money paying someone else to run the servers who's better at it than they are, in this case, AWS. And then they could have taken that same money and those same people and just had them focus on making better home improvement options. Like, I don't know, like having people actually in the store when you actually need them.
That would be helpful.
That sounds like a real gripe, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Drives me up the wall. And then I go to Ace Hardware and they're like, there's a person at every corner. I'm like, hey, can I find this? Let me take you directly to it. I'm like, God, why isn't Home Depot like this? Anyway, so the main deal here is that instead of focusing on getting good at running computers when you're not actually in the computer business, you just happen to have computers because everybody else does. You can just focus on applications and customers that will actually help you like differentiate your business. And so that's a big investment. So you can focus less on tasks that actually aren't going to move your business forward directly and more on tasks that are actually going to help your business move forward. The other thing is that because you can ask for more servers or you can give servers back, it basically means that like if Bob from marketing comes over to you and says, hey, the foot site is going to require 60 servers, and you start up 60 servers and then it turns out that you actually need 120 servers, you just add 60 servers. So adding servers and removing servers in AWS is relatively trivial once you have it set up properly. So instead of stop guessing on your infrastructure capacity needs, what it should say is that you can easily correct guesses on your infrastructure capacity needs. That's what it should say. And then one cool thing is that as Amazon gets better and better at like hosting storage or running virtual machines, what ends up happening is that they keep lowering prices. Like no joke, they keep lowering the price of like a virtual machine or storage. They keep lowering the prices because they keep getting better and better at running the services. So what's fascinating is I don't even remember what someone tracked it one time, but it's like they've lowered prices like 27 times or something over the last 15 years. So for example, let's say that we were buying one of those web servers and they cost $1 in 2013. Nowadays it would cost us like 83 cents or something. Like that's almost like a 20% savings. It's like
awesome.
Yeah.
They are clearly trying to put their competitors out of business.
They are constantly like low. And by the way, just to say this, these guys are the market leader for cloud computing by a huge margin. Like no one's been able to catch up with them.
So they don't have to try to put their business out of business there. Okay.
Yeah. The other thing you get in addition to like economies of scale that allow you to get cheaper and cheaper with your usage is that imagine like you don't have to unbox any systems. You don't have to go through any kind of headaches in order to get 100 boxes to work. You just turn them on and they just show up in your web console. Well, that speed and agility cannot be overstated. Like, because all of a sudden, if you're like, hey, we've got 24 hours to stand up a new website, guess what? We could do it in 24 hours, right? Easy. Like, honestly, it would probably take us like 2 hours. So that speed and agility cannot be understated. It's like ridiculous how fast you can stand something up. Sorry, I'm moving this out of the way. Okay. And then I think the last one is that let's say that we find out that like people are like super loving the website in Japan. We could deploy. So let's say we deployed it on the Eastern Seaboard, like in Virginia, because we wanted to, right? And then we go look at our traffic profile and we find out that we've got, 20,000 customers in Japan, which anyway, that'd be funny, but anyway, moving on. So
those folks are into it. No,
those folks are repressed. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Japanese culture, but they're a little repressed. So let's say that we needed to create a copy of our website over in Japan. We could do that in minutes. So like literally Amazon has data centers in Japan. We would just literally just spin up some servers in Japan. That's what would happen. They have data centers, by the way, in 29 locations, I think, all over the world. So Africa, Mumbai, China, Australia, it's crazy. So you can literally launch servers in a few minutes everywhere. So
quick question about the servers thing. So
yeah.
I was under the impression that any website that pretty much had a .com on it could be accessed anywhere in the world. Is that inaccurate? Because if we had the foot fetish website here in Georgia or whatever, people in Japan could not access it in theory.
They could access it, but it would be slow.
This would be
because they're going all the way from Japan, all the way across the transatlantic wire to our data center in Virginia.
I'm with you now. Okay.
So the way we make that faster is we put a copy of the site over in Japan. So it might be the exact same website. Like it doesn't even have to be a new domain name. But what would happen is that when a user over there requested the .com website, instead of getting directed to Virginia, they would automatically and invisibly get redirected to the servers in Japan. They wouldn't even notice that they were going somewhere else. To them, it would be hidden. That happens all the time. Like if you all of a sudden were to go to Australia and hit like, let's say CNN.com or whatever, you would actually go to a server that's actually in Australia for CNN.com. You wouldn't actually go to all the way back to the States. Because the way they design this is when they say go global in minutes, you can actually kick out copies of your entire website across the entire world. It takes almost nothing to do that.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So any website you visit creates that kind of cached content.
Cache content?
cached meaning that there's a copy of it. It's not the original. There's a copy of the website.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So like in Australia, there would be a copy of the website. In Japan, there would be a copy of the website. And if we updated the copy that was in Virginia,
Mhm.
it would automatically update the copies that are in Australia and Japan. Yeah, they've gotten really sophisticated with this kind of stuff. So whenever you go and visit any kind of popular website like CNN or I don't know, just pick Amazon.com, you're actually hitting a local copy that's local to Georgia.
Okay.
And so somewhere in there's a primary site. And so we're hitting the copy, which as long as the copy and the primary stay in sync, which they do, everything's cool. And if they update the primary, then all of the copies get updated. So it's really a great model. But that's what the Go Global Minutes actually enables, is that Amazon with one click can enable that kind of thing. So we can make a single website fast for people all over the world because we can make copies of it. That whole conversation was hilarious. Anyway, all right. So those are the 6 benefits, right? Is basically stop paying for data centers,
Right.
drop servers that you don't need, cost optimization, only pay for servers that you actually need, right? So you can actually like give things, scale things the way you need to. In other words, you can be precise. If they ask for 100 and you needed 30, give back the 70, keep the 30, right? Then things are getting cheaper because Amazon's constantly dropping prices because they're getting better and better at pricing, at like doing this stuff. You can get really fast because you can stand up a website in like minutes. It's amazing. And you can take these websites and services that you want to run out there on these on the cloud computing, you can make them go global in minutes. So you could literally just feed the world your web pages or your app or whatever in minutes. You don't have to like do anything complicated. Now, here are some of the core categories, which I think you saw when we were looking at the console before, right? Is you saw that, there were like categories for compute. So just so you know, there's compute categories, which is like virtual servers. There's networking categories, which is just our ability to kind of connect things together. Storage, which is just like the hard drive that you have in your laptop or your computer, or like if you use Google Drive or Dropbox, just like that. Yeah. And then the rest of these are a little bit more complex topics, but they probably make sense just based on the words being used. Management and governance is literally about how you manage the other services. Security, identity, and compliance is literally how you secure the other services. And database is the only one that isn't about other services. Database is like, how do you store and organize information that isn't on a hard drive? Database is basically an application that's purpose built to organize information and make it available to you very rapidly. So think of this like your Excel spreadsheets. Excel spreadsheets, in a sense, are a form of organized data. And that's what databases are, is they're a form of organized data that are organized in a way so that you can actually access them fast for what you're looking for. So think of databases as basically an organized storage repository. So different from storage. Storage is just like, there's just a bunch of files out there.
Right.
Databases is structured data.
Okay.
So like if someone said, hey, can I get a list of every person I've ever talked to about refinancing their home or, wholesaling or something like that, and someone gave you a spreadsheet that had all that information in there, that's what a database would be. Is a database would be an application that has all of that data inside of it, structured so that you could search and say, hey, I'm looking for Victoria Cassidy's name because I want to know where she lives in her house. And you would just search for her name and it would return the house to you, the address. So databases are just structured data. That's all they are.
Okay.
So, and that's it. So that's module 1, actually. Oh, good timing. Okay, so then here's the question for you. This is a little test.
Okay.
With no consequences, except I'll give you 1 billion points that don't mean anything. What is cloud computing? Like, which of these do you think is cloud computing?
C.
That's exactly right. It is literally just the on-demand delivery of computing power. That's it. Hold Hold on just 1 second. All right, that was. So C is the right answer, right?
Okay.
And note that all of this is connected to the internet. So it's good that you notice that, right? Is that literally it is all about, all of this is available across the internet. That's what makes it cloud computing, is that without the internet, there's no reason to even do it because you can't get access to it. Okay, so what's another name for an on-premise deployment? This is going to be process of elimination, I think.
Private cloud deployment?
Yes. Did you know that already? How did you know
No,
that already?
I just went process of elimination. So
Oh, Dee, this is going to be so much fun. So excited. So yeah, so it's not obviously cloud-based because we talked about that. It's not a hybrid because that's like dual. We already talked about that. And then I don't even know why AWS cloud is there because we know that's just cloud, right?
right.
It is private cloud. So oddly enough, sometimes they refer to like on-premise deployments as private cloud, but they don't have nearly the capabilities like a public cloud provider does. So I don't even know why we call it private cloud, because they can't even do half the things that a public cloud. It doesn't matter, but you're right. So C is the right answer. And then how does the scale of cloud computing help you save money, save costs?
A.
Well, that actually would save you money, right? You don't have to invest in technology resources before using them. It's not that, but that's more about the ability to provision and give back. It's not really about the scale. Like as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, how does that save you money?
Oh, well, then C. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see, accessing services on demand helps prevent excess or limited capacity. So that would be true, but the elasticity is the thing that makes that work, right? Because you can be elastic, right? Because if you're excessive, you can pull it back, but that's elasticity that makes that happen. It's actually the aggregated cloud usage of a number of customers, meaning the more people who use AWS, the better AWS gets at running that service, and they keep lowering costs.
Okay.
Because they're getting better and better and better at running larger and larger services, right? So,
Gotcha.
yeah. And that's it. That's the whole module. So we actually just covered the 3 cloud deployment models, which is cloud, on-premise, and hybrid. And we talked about the 6 benefits, right? Everything from cost optimization to trading variable costs to, going global, right? All those pieces. So that's the 6 benefits of cloud computing. And that's it. That was the whole first module.
You made that you made that really clear and easy. I appreciate that.
That's what I do. That's what I do for a living. So, so what we're going to do is that give me a little bit of time and I'll actually like send you the PDF for this. And then when I stop the recording, which I'm actually going to do that right now, I'll send you the